All right, let's dive into something truly fascinating today, the journey of tracing Navajo family history. Now, this isn't your average ancestry search that just follows a nice, neat, straight line. No, this is about piecing together a story from records that are scattered across different agencies, archives, and some really pivotal moments in history.
And that's the big question, isn't it? How do you even begin to build a family tree when the pieces are all over the place? See, unlike a lot of other genealogical searches, tracing Navajo ancestry is kind of like putting together a giant puzzle. You've got pieces from federal census data, tribal records, and even from some really unexpected places like old trading post ledgers. So where on earth do you start?
Well, the key really is to start by building a solid foundation. This isn't about finding that one magic document on day one. It's about getting a feel for the landscape. Understanding what records are even out there and knowing where to look first to start putting together the framework of your family story.
I want you to think of it like a giant funnel. We're going to start at the very widest part with these broad federal records that cover huge groups of people. Then, step by step, we're going to narrow our focus down to the really specific, detailed documents that are unique to the Navajo Nation. This way, you make sure you don't miss any of those crucial early clues.
So our first stop is the big one, the federal government's own collections. These are, by far, the most comprehensive records out there, and they often give you those essential names, dates, and locations that are going to guide the entire rest of your search.
The National Archives, or NARA as you'll hear it called, is basically ground zero for this kind of research. It's the central hub for all historical records from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which means it has a massive collection of census rolls, school files, official letters, you name it. It is, without a doubt, the most logical place for anyone to begin. Okay, but listen, not all census records are created equal, and you really need to know the two most important types for this search. First, the 1910 federal census had this special Indian population schedule, which is fantastic for identifying the tribe of a person and their parents. But the BIA Indian Census Rolls, which were taken every year starting in 1885, that's where you can really strike genealogical gold. They often list both English and Navajo names, the relationships in the household, and ages. Using these two sources together, that's a seriously powerful strategy.
Okay, so once we've got a good foothold with those big federal records, it's time to start narrowing our funnel. Now we get to focus on the records that were created specifically by and for the Navajo Nation itself. This is where things get really interesting.
Now, before we go any further, there is something you absolutely have to understand because it changes everything. It's a fundamental part of Navajo culture. The clan system is matrilineal. This means your identity and your family line flow through your mother's side. And this isn't just a cultural fact, it's the structural key to unlocking the records. Knowing an ancestor's clan can open doors that a simple last name never could.
And here's a perfect example of what I mean. You might find entire sections of records that aren't organized by a family name, but by a clan, like the Tachini. This is exactly why oral family history is so incredibly important. If you know your family's clan, you have this incredibly powerful search term that a typical census taker would never have written down.
Now, the Bureau of Indian Affairs didn't just have one big central office. It worked through smaller regional agencies. So that means a lot of the records are sorted by location. The process is pretty simple, but it's essential. First, you figure out where your ancestors lived. Then, you match that area to a BIA agency, like Fort Defiance or Shiprock. And then, you target your search on that specific agency's files. Easy, right?
Beyond the census, there are two more incredibly rich sources you need to know about. Allotment records are amazing because they literally tie families to specific pieces of land, and they often list all the heirs, which can help you build out whole new branches of your family tree. And then, of course, there's the Navajo Nation's own Vital Records Office. They're the official source for birth records and tribal enrollment information.
All right, now let's step outside the box for a minute. Some of the most revealing clues about your ancestors aren't always in those official government files. Sometimes they're hidden in the records of everyday life, education, and service.
Federal boarding school records can be an absolute treasure trove. You can sometimes find a student's parents listed, their home community, and even their clan. Then you have early trading post and mission records, which can place a family in a specific area long before formal censuses even began. And military records, well, they can open up a whole new chapter of your family's history.
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, at least 96 different federal boarding schools had Navajo students. This wasn't just a small thing, it was a huge, widespread system. And its records, while they can be heartbreaking to read, are a vast and incredibly important genealogical resource.
Of course, we have to talk about the Navajo Code Talkers. They represent such a significant chapter in both American and Navajo history. They left behind service files, photos, battle reports. All of it is preserved at the National Archives. So if you have a veteran from that era in your family tree, these records are an absolute must-see.
So we've covered a lot of physical archives and different types of records, but I've got some great news for you. You don't necessarily have to book a flight to Washington, D.C. to get started. Technology has put so many of these documents right at our fingertips.
Here are the big 3 websites you really need to know. Family Search is excellent for those BIA agency records and census rolls. Ancestry.com has a massive collection of digitized microfilms straight from NARA. And Fold3, that one specializes in military history, so it's the go-to place for researching code talkers and other veterans.
The bottom line is this. While the path might seem complex, it has honestly never been more accessible. The digital revolution has unlocked these archives for a whole new generation of researchers. A journey that once required tons of travel and sifting through dusty old boxes, well, now that journey can begin right from your own home.
You know, these records hold so much more than just names and dates. They hold stories. Stories of resilience, of family, and of a nation. They offer a direct link to the past. So the only real question left is the one you see right here. What story is waiting for you to uncover in the archives?